But remember, you can use the hashtag Siasa Bomba. I am Dibala in air. And I'm really excited on this first installment of Siasa Bomba, where today we're focusing, as I mentioned earlier, the role of governors in devolved Kenya. Is it a private fiefdom or servant leadership? So first off the mic, I'll just want to introduce our panelists who will be engaging us throughout the conversation. And I have the great pleasure of hosting Kevin Osido. He is an accomplished governance specialist who serves as Executive Director of County Governors Watch, that is CGW. This is an NGO whose purpose is to provide solutions for socio-economic and political development in the counties of Kenya by educating and building the capacity of citizens and county government officers. We also have with us Honorable Majala Mlagui. She is the elected Deputy Governor of the County Government of Taita, Taveta, one of the 47 regional governments in Kenya. Majala first entered the political scene during the national elections in 2017 when she ran on a platform based on young development-focused leadership and youth and women's empowerment. Prior to entering politics, Majala ran a social impact company that empowered rural artisanal miners in East Africa by helping them create sustainable livelihoods through responsible mining, ethical sourcing, and access to fair trade markets. Majala also provided consulting services on extractive governance and policy issues related to artisanal and small-scale mining to development and governmental agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Siasa Bomba.
Thank you.
Asante sana.
Shukran.
So I'm really stoked that you've joined us on this first installment. And this is just to highlight and see, harking back to when devolution was shaken into place, how have we fared on so far? And I'll begin with you, Kevin, just first off the mark by asking you one simple question. 9 years down the line, will you hail the governor's role in mainstreaming devolution? A resounding success?
The moderately successful. Moderately successful, because if you look at one of the reasons why Kenyans opted for a devolved system of governance was to move closer, rather move power closer to the people. And this power was meant to ensure that their voices are made to count and that they are also able to make key decisions in the resource management and sharing. And that is not what we are seeing today. And if you look at the total amounts of monies that the national government has taken back to the people through national treasury, we are talking of about 2.34 trillion Kenya shillings. And if this is money that is supposed to be changing the people's lives, honestly, Kenyans should have expected much more better from our governance and from our governance system. And so that's why I rank our devolution and particularly the performance of governors as moderately successful.
I wonder if Mlagui will be holding the same view. Moderately successful, you're the deputy governor. Of course, maybe you'll want to say, oh, a resounding success.
We're still in the toddler stage, I would say, of devolution. And I would say that we've done more than moderately, moderately successful. Some of the gains that we have noted in very far-flung areas of Kenya would not have been achieved if we still had centralized government. Some of the matters that we're seeing that citizens are engaging with the governorships, including members of parliament and members of county assembly, are happening because government is now closer to the people. So we're more than moderately successful. We're more than, we're seeing the fruits of devolution to a point where the economies are growing more than they were before when government was centralized. We're seeing people more empowered on the ground. We're seeing more projects in terms of health, roads, school infrastructure being adequately catered for. So I wouldn't say that we're there yet. We're still 7 years into devolution. We've had 56 years of independence. Slightly more than that. So we're not at the point where we can say that this is going to be a resounding success, but definitely what we're seeing on the ground is miles more than we've seen over the last 50 or so years.
So I wonder, Kevin, or you with the County Governors Watch, of course, you've been gallivanting about trying to see what the 47 counties are doing so far. What is your assessment generally?
My assessment insofar as performance of our counties is as Mheshimiwa rightfully says, we have made certain strides. But if you are to look at what the expectation of the citizens were, I think we expected much more than what we've been able to see. And of course, what we have experienced, or what we have, the milestones that we have made have faced certain challenges. And one of those challenges has been delayed disbursement of resources from national government to county governments. But that is really not supposed to be an excuse, because we've also seen county governments and governors gallivanting around failures of national treasury to be able to give them enough resources. But if you look at what our counties can be able to bring out insofar as own source revenue is concerned, we don't see governors putting a lot of emphasis in what they can be able to generate from within their own counties. They are waiting for national government to give them resources, whereas the Constitution and other supportive legislation, such as the Public Finance Management Act, Urban Areas and Cities Act, have given them that power and authority to be able to ensure that their counties are actually building up heavy investments to be able to plow back resources into the counties. You talk about what national government has been able to do, and we are focusing on young people, for instance. If you go to almost all the, let me say half of the counties, or rather 3/4 of them, so we talk about 34 counties. Look at the state of youth unemployment. We have young people coming back to Nairobi, whereas devolution was meant to be, getting the bulk of young people out of Nairobi into the counties. And this is purely because governors and counties have failed, in my view, to ensure that young people have opportunities to secure employment and to be seen to be generating revenues into the counties. So if you look at how our counties have performed in terms of expanding employment, the employment bracket for the youth is quite wanting. Of course, there are policy issues which also border around things to do with Schedule 4 functions, because youth is not a devolved function, but is partly devolved because a lot of what governments are doing is supposed to respond to young people's benefits. And so these are concerns that, from the eye of the citizens and from what we are seeing, as county governance watch, we expect that counties are supposed to be expanding spaces and opportunities for employment, which then is supposed to ensure that people are raising money, and then that money is getting plowed back into the counties through taxes, through cess, and several others.
I want to interfere right there. We can't say that we started devolution in 2013. We got our constitution in 2010, and we expect that we have a full-blown successful story right from the beginning. You yourself understand that when devolution was envisioned within the Constitution in 2010, there were certain frameworks that needed to be put in place. Once we had our elections in 2013, then we had a team of people who are now coming in to see how do we implement exactly what was listed out in Schedule 4, all of the functions that are transitioning. This is why we had the Transition Authority. This is why we had a lot of training happening for all of the officers that were coming into government, trying to see how do we put flesh on this structure, the skeleton that has been created by the Constitution. Now, if we were truly to be successful, as you're saying that we want to see counties expanding, then what I would have expected is that all of the Schedule 4 functions that are devolved would not exist at the national government level. Health would be at the county. Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture, Irrigation would all be at the county, because these are devolved functions. Road functions, transport would be at the county. But what we're finding is that we're getting 15% of the national budget, yet expected to perform 35 to 50% of the functions as per the Constitution.
And
when we look about own source,
when
we look at own source revenue, I will give you an example of Taita Taveta. Before the 2013 elections, we had county councils that were able to generate revenue, maybe around the 100 to maybe 250 million mark. As a county government, we receive, together with conditional grants, maybe about 5 billion a year. Out of that, we have 350 million, which we've been able to generate as a government of own source revenue. 350 million out of 5 billion. So when we're saying that the county governments need to be generating their own source revenues to be able to expand these functions, then I think we're a bit deluded, because most of the money still is retained at national level, and not even just at the ministry level. We have development agencies. You have, for example, the Coast Development Waterworks Agency. We have KERA, we have KURA. All of them holding monies that should be essentially channeled to the counties to make those expansive investments that you're talking about. Youth may not be a devolved function, but it is integrated across all of the functions that we're talking about.
I'm sorry to butt in, just to ask you one simple question as well, because is it a matter of ingenuity and creativity from the county level on how to generate revenue, or the disbursement of these funds? Because we're talking two different kettle of fish here.
It's both.
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah, but from the aspect of generating your own revenue, because we have a county like Laikipia, and I think the governor has actually mooted the idea that, yeah, we should go to, the infrastructure bonding and, try and source funds from the capital markets, as it were. That is a good, model of generating revenue for a county. And I wonder which other counties have floated such an idea. And this is what the creativity we're asking. Instead of solely depending on the national government, where we can see services and resources, they're stonewalled and people are complaining at the county level. Why can't you come up with your own creativity and ingenuity to have sources of revenue, right? Just you hold on to that. Let me just come back to Kevin, because he wanted to interject a bit. I hope you've not lost your track.
No, I haven't, because Mheshimiwa mentioned something that really keeps bothering me when I talk about interact with county governments. Yes. And this is the failure to fully devolve functions. And you see, she's mentioning water, she's mentioning issues to do with health, partly even education has issues. Agriculture, we have over 74 parastatals that are supposed to be fully devolved, but are being held by national government.
So you're on the same page with her?
We are the same page,
okay.
but no, we are the same page, but that is fully on the failure of governors. Because if governors through their own institutions, say the Council of Governors, can push, because when we introduced devolution in 2013, and she mentioned the Transition Authority, which was chaired by Kinuthia Wamwangi, came up with a good report, which was meant to ensure that functions that are supposed to be devolved are fully devolved. 8 years down the line, why haven't we devolved these functions, and yet we are seeing resources that are supposed to be going to the counties still being managed by national governments? Health is a serious issue, and we are talking COVID-19, for instance, and counties are threatening to close down. And if you look at how national government has systematically cabalized governors to be able to agree into even signing agreements, which in my view is not supposed to be the case, because when you make commitments, and forget about your responsibility as a governor to be able to ensure services are delivered, and then use the excuse that functions are not devolved, it is for you to engage with your county assemblies to ensure that you have effective rules and regulations, so legal frameworks that are going to be ensuring that the functions are devolved are being properly executed, which in my view, I do not think that governors have effectively done. So I remember that today we are talking about governors, and some of them, for those who are elected in the second term, are 13 months of their terms. What does that therefore mean for sustainability of counties? The while you talk about on-source revenue, in my view, counties have more than 110 revenue streams. Governors have only concentrated on one. And every time we see them, working with TV stations to share on,
property taxes.
Taxes and all that. Yet there are over 110 streams, which governors are supposed to be ensuring that they work around with their county assemblies to put in place laws so that people are not taxed. You move from Nairobi, for example, to Laikipia, you mentioned. Why should a vehicle be taxed at every entry point of a county? That should not be happening. You go to the mamambogas, we have county officers who are always working with papers, asking them for 20 shillings, 40 shillings, 100 shillings. Why should the mamambogas be stressed to be paying to a county government that, in my view, sometimes has not even made it possible for them to access markets? So that we have services that are being delivered, and people are also feeling that the resources which they are giving back to the counties are working for them. Fish farmers along the lake region, we have 13 counties in the lake region. Why haven't they come up to be able to put together a fish facility? Why should fish move from Kisumu to Thika for processing? That money is being mined at Thika. Why can't governors around the lake region consider it having a manufacturing facility for fish farmers to ensure on-source revenue?
Majala, yes.
I think right there you're being contradictory, my brother. When we're talking about on-source revenues, of course we're going to be talking about taxes. We're not talking about government getting into business. So you've kind of split it in between when you're talking about the fish farmers and setting up a manufacturing facility. There will be taxes coming through business permit, for example, through movement of cargo, maybe through small areas, maybe the fish farmers coming from the lake to the manufacturing facility. But in terms of the large-scale revenue that is coming in, it would be going straight to the pockets of the people, not to the county government.
Which is not happening, because that money is being collected.
For purposes of administration. So we have to be very clear about what we're discussing here of what own source revenue is.
Which is
not businesses. It is taxation to the population within that particular area. Now, you've just complained about mama mbogas being taxed by people walking around on the road. You've just complained about...
I'm not complaining. I am presenting...
But the question is, Majala, is taxation the only source of revenue?
It is not.
It is not the only source of revenue.
Fantastic.
It is one of the sources. Yes. However, when we're talking about own source revenue, how does a county government generate or mobilize that revenue? It is either through taxation. It is either through those bonds that you're talking about. If you live in an area that has the market potential, it is either through development grants and development partners coming in and supporting you, or any other investment capacity, for example. So when we're talking about a county government's revenue,
grants are not sources of revenue.
They are sources of revenue. When we're talking about World Bank giving 101 million Kenya shillings for a banana plant investment within the county, we count it as our revenue, not own source revenue.
Exactly. It is a source of revenue, but not own source revenue.
So when we're talking about own source revenue,
is
then
money
that is
generated
taxation.
by the county government, not from World Bank. But you can't tax a grant, Mheshimiwa.
You can't
when
tax
World Bank builds water,
listen, we've
but
asked
you can't
go.
You're mixing the issues, because she's telling you that is just one source of the taxes.
Yes,
The grant
of the
taxes,
revenue, not own source revenue, but of the revenue.
Can I make it clear?
Specific about what own source revenue is. If we're going to be clear about what own source revenue is, it is what we're able to generate through, as you said, the laws, policies of the county. Not necessarily these other matters that are coming through the development grants, but these other items are revenue for the county. Now, you cannot say that we cannot tax Mama Mboga, but at the same time you're sitting doing nothing, not getting taxation.
What I'm saying is that Mama Mboga is not feeling the tax which the county is taking from her.
That's a separate conversation.
But that is really the essence of...
So feeling is, the requisite resources and the services that is bound to be coming from the county is not available.
Yes, is not just available, is not commensurate.
Okay.
Because, for instance, a county government cannot pass laws for milk dairy farmers to be taxed for the milk which they are producing, but the roads that are supposed to be leading from the farm to the market are not done. It is not the responsibility of the dairy farmers to repair the roads.
That's very correct. That's right.
It is the responsibility of the government.
Yes.
So when the farmer is being taxed, I don't want to see my taxes paying people's salaries. The taxes are supposed to be for service delivery, which is what we are seeing today, which is why I said counties have failed to ensure that they raise their own resources to be able to plow back for service delivery. Instead, the little resources, and I said there are 110 sources of revenue, for own source revenue for counties. For sources of revenue, for revenue sources, we have about 3 of them. Equitable share, that comes from national government, that is taxed. We have grants. For example, she mentioned World Bank. You cannot tax World Bank money because that money is money which is coming in for specific facilities. If a county like Taita Taveta says we don't have water, and World Bank says we are going to ensure that the citizens of Mutembei, for example, have water, you cannot now begin asking them to pay because World Bank will ask you, we are doing it for the sake of the citizens. And then you have equalization fund that goes now to other counties that are incapacitated,
Right. I want us just to, also wind up on the funding and the taxes as well, just the resources that we're talking about. But the existential argument has been that not all counties are endowed the same. So we cannot say that the resources can be equally distributed from all the counties because different counties have different resources. They have been, endowed differently. That is the argument that is on the ground. That's why you have the equalization fund as it is right now. But you've been pushing this particular narrative as far as we're not endowed, resourcefully, so we cannot be compared to other counties in terms of, progress, in terms of development? Your remarks.
We have to understand again that from independence to where we stand at the point of devolution, there was a lot of money centralized, and the development that we saw in these far-flung counties didn't happen the same way that we saw in, for example, neighboring counties of Nairobi, in the Kirinyagas, the Nyeris, the Nakurus, there's a circumference that you can look at from Nairobi going out. Now, when we're talking about marginalized counties or counties that would require the equalization fund, most of them are resource rich. We cannot deny that. They have plenty of minerals, they have plenty of tourism opportunities, they have plenty of farming potential. They could be our agricultural baskets, but all of these opportunities require investment. And not just government investment, private sector investment. So when we say that these counties are still struggling, they've not been able to be opened up. For example, we've come into a county that is 17,000 square kilometers. Most of that is park area, 62% of it is park area. None of the revenue that is coming from the park comes into the county for purposes of expanding, for example, the road infrastructure, for expanding the health facilities, for expanding the water distribution across the county. So we would then, of course, rely on national government to provide us with that equitable share disbursement to be able to make those investments, to then attract people like yourselves to say, Debal, we have an area within the Savo where you can build your lodge. And your lodge will then be able to employ, let's say, 50 youth, and this youth are the same ones who are then going to expand the economy of the county. So there has to be a sense of what are we talking of investment in terms of the national government all the way down to the county government that would then help us harness these opportunities. One of the opportunities that we've looked at from that agricultural perspective in the coastal region, for example, is large-scale agriculture. And that is something that needed to be pumped in a lot of money for the 1 million acres, for example, in Tana River, to be successful. But again, you find that aside from the lack of support to the county governments for this kind of projects, there's a lot of corruption that is happening. We can't get away from that. There's a lot of resources are getting lost for the benefit of the Mwananchi because of corruption. Now, we have to ask ourselves, both from the county perspective and the national government perspective, what are we doing as part of consequences when these funds get lost? Because then we get into conversations where we're being told counties are failing, but we don't have the resources. When we look at the equalization perspective, for example, the law hasn't gone through. Some of these formulas that are being utilized to say that this is how resources will be distributed across the supposedly marginalized counties it's very contentious. So in our county, where we can very clearly see that the poverty levels are below the 50% or whatever levels are in the rest of the country, we're being told we're not necessarily a marginalized county. So is it that the animals are the ones that are benefiting more? Is it the land that is benefiting more? Or is it the population that is there that requires to be supported through all of these funds that are from the national level?
Allow me to just butt in and hear from Kevin, so that we could actually wind up on that particular issue of resources or revenue generation from the counties. Your take?
One of the things that I think Mheshimiwa is not bringing out clearly is the functional role of the county government, particularly when it comes to intergovernmental relations. Because we have a law that protects what Mheshimiwa is talking about. How is Taita Taveta County, for example, a county that almost 3/4 is a national park, supposed to engage with the national government to ensure that its opportunities and potential are exploited? Remember that national parks are national government functions. But we cannot run away from the fact that if Taita Taveta, as an example, considers an effective engagement with the national government to find a clear-cut or a cross-cutting mainstreamed co-shared responsibility between the government and the county government and the national government through the national park, there has to be a win-win. What the county governments have failed to do is...
The case in point is Narok as well.
Exactly, because of Masai Mara, you know, and we have many of those kind of examples. And that is an issue, that boils down to on-source revenue, because if these county governments can consider an effective engagement with the national government, the resources, for example, that tourists pay at the parks, if we can agree that the county governments and the national government have a conversation where the locals benefit from what the foreigners bring into the county, other than those resources being foiled back to national government treasury for national duty or national functions, in my view, we can find a solution to those kind of issues. And that is where, for me, I consider a failure for county governments, particularly governors, to think outside the box. How do I boost what I am getting from national government through whatever fund, whether it's equalization or equitable share or grants that come from Friends of Kenya? Mm-hmm. What else can we be able to do? Because this country is endowed with immense capacity. The opportunities are innumerable. Mm-hmm. But what the governors have failed to do is to think progressively out of the expectations of that citizens had for them, because it would be an excuse, in my view, for what, for instance, Mheshimiwa is saying, assuming that you are in a rally somewhere in Voi, yes, and you are telling them the tourists are bringing money that goes back to national government because national park is a national government function. That, in my view, would be an excuse. Let's find an opportunity to engage with the national government through the Intergovernmental Relations and Technical Committee and the committees within the Council of Governors, because we cannot continue to have these excuses where local resources are being channeled back to counties, yet we have frameworks, legal frameworks that are supposed to help us respond to some of these questions.
Some of the disbursement that is coming from the National Treasury, at times you find, the whole lot of money, billions, going back to the National Treasury.
It's not supposed to be.
It has not been utilized by the counties.
Okay.
And then the stock excuse is like, oh, this money was disbursed late. We could not actually, implement some of the project we wanted to do because of time constraints. So the late coming of the disbursement also has been a niggling worry. And I think, thorn in the flesh for the counties.
So there are two things that I need to correct here.
Please.
Debal, I'm actually surprised that you've said that. No money is returned to the National Treasury, whether it has been disbursed late.
But from the Auditor's General's book, if you count, they've always been saying, oh, this particular tidy sum of money went back to the National Treasury because it has not been utilized.
If all of us can remember our basic accounting, for any year where you've not utilized your funds, it will then carry forward to the next year. And this is what we then budgeted for. We budget for, and if you look at all of the county government financial statements, you will note that they will have a figure. If monies haven't been fully disbursed in one financial year, they will have a figure that will have been brought forward from the previous year. So the money is not returned. The money actually is able to be utilized by the county governments. Whether it actually comes in on time, that is an argument that we've all had as county governments, to say, we need to be able to, you want us to be able to provide health services. You want us to be able to provide water to the citizens, but you're not giving us the money to pay the suppliers to be able to carry out the services. How do we move forward? So that is a challenge. But one thing that I feel my brother here is very stuck on failure is stating that we have not done what is required to engage with national government to enable us to get the resources that are required for certain functions. So if I specifically look at the tourism sector, we as a county government have engaged with not only the ministry, we've gone all the way to the president, to State House, to try and figure out what is the best way of bringing back the resources that are generated from the Savo East and Savo West National Park to be managed, as you said, either co-shared or some form of agreement done between Taita Taveta County Government and the Ministry of Wildlife and Tourism. Yeah. That has not, the discussions there have not necessarily borne any fruit, partly because of reluctance of national government in engaging with us. So my question to you would be, what is the failure of the current cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries engaging with governors and deputy governors and county assemblies within that matter? We've looked at what possibilities exist for our county to be able to get the resources in other manners other than the Intergovernmental Relations Committee that we're talking about. How do we de-gazette a national park and make it a game reserve? You've mentioned Narok. Narok is able to actualize the potential of the Mara because it's a game reserve. It's not a national park. So how do we start comparing those situations so that Taita Taveta can then be able to access the funds that are coming in from there? But in addition or aside to all of those legislative issues, we're also looking at how do we engage with all of the businesses that are established within the park to then to ensure that job opportunities are going to our youth, to ensure that local content is actually catered for our local businesses. Then they shouldn't be getting their tomatoes and lettuce and the rest from Nairobi. That should be coming from the county itself. So those are the type of innovative programs that we're thinking about to empower our people, but that's not going to bring in revenue to the county government. That's going to bring in revenue to the pockets of the local mwananchi.
Thank you.
One specific,
Could we,
example.
I know we can go hours and on this particular. I need the last one. We need to broach this particular.
Last one. One specific example, specifically on mining. You have a law that has been enacted in 2016, very specifically saying that revenues from the mineral industry need to be split 70% national government, 20% counties, 10% local communities. Over 1 billion Kenya shillings, probably even more than that, 3-4 times more than that, has been paid to the national government through treasury.
Thank you.
None of that money has come to counties or communities.
I have to step
and
in.
It is not for
I have to step in. I want to give you time to rejoin because yes, we are actually pinched for time and we need to cover a lot of stuff that we have ahead of us. So let's talk about, first of all, governors as steamrollers of ethnicity, because this is an accusation that has been raised, nepotism and cronyism. And we have a statement here from Kogi Wamwere, who is noting that, quote unquote, to avoid the tragedy of this distorted devolution, the Constitution should not have allowed negative ethnicity to be the ideology of devolution to the detriment of nationalism, and should not have conceived devolution that would degenerate into Majimbo. He notes that, yes, there's a lot of ethnicity, nepotism that is happening currently, distorted devolution. Do you really fly with this particular argument? Maybe it will be apropos to ask you, because you'll say no.
I would say no, of course not. I think we also devolution as an avenue of access to opportunities for all of our ethnic tribes. And we have to agree that Kenyans, to some extent, have embraced negative ethnicity in some aspects of life that are detrimental to all of us. So it's not a matter of devolution, it is part of our national ethos and values. What do we hold dear to us? Why is it that some tribes may be valued more than others? Why is it that some seem to get more opportunities than others? When devolution came in, we hoped that would help address some of the challenges of accessing job opportunities and business opportunities even for the local communities who seem to have been marginalized at that particular point. When you are 0.1% of the population and you're surrounded by 40% of the population who seem to then also hold maybe 80% of the wealth, you have to find ways of pushing. And maybe this is why we're starting to see a bit of that negative ethnicity being...
But from your assessment, do you think it has an entrenched ethnicity? Because we can have a case in point of Moi University. Remember when there was that particular towing and froing of who should be the vice chancellor, Lab Nairo shouldn't be the vice chancellor because he's not from that particular area. And we had the governor coming to the fore and saying, yeah, we need our man to be the person who's heading this particular, university. That is just a good case in point right now. Nepotism, we talk about also currently what we have in makwiny, where people are raising eyebrows. Why do we have the chief health officer, related to the governor being in that particular position? So where do we draw a demarcation line? Yeah, you could be qualified still, have good papers, but you're related to the governor.
It's definitely, devolution has definitely raised or put a spotlight on some of these issues. I can't say whether it's right or wrong in terms of should you not be related to the governor or not, or the deputy governor or not, because in some places it's a very small population. You have counties where there are only 177,000 of them. The chances of relations are going to be high. But where maybe we need to be looking at the negative ethnicity is, why is it that as Kenyans, we're unable to say that we can be led by whoever is in that particular place? If I decided to run for governorship in Isiolo, would I be accepted? Probably not. because I'm not from that particular area. And those conversations are what we need to have as a country.
All right.
Debal, we actually have, when we had devolution coming in, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission issued guidelines on how counties are supposed to undertake human resource responsibilities. And the guidelines were that you do a 70-30%, so that you have 70% from those who are locals, and then 30% from those who are outsiders. True be it, Kenyans, the way in which, and Mheshimiwa has rightfully said it, our politics is largely ethnic. And what governors and anybody who is elected in office will do is to identify those who are very, instrumental towards my being elected as a person. But remember that that is not the expectation of what Kenyans had when they voted for a new constitution that then gave us counties. Our expectation was that we will be looking at performance, and this performance is supposed to be equated to service delivery, so that it doesn't matter who is in that office as long as services are delivered. If I come from Rarieda, for example, the chief officer health or water should not be from my village for me to be able to access water. However, the first generation governors are the ones who actually moved this to be able to more or less install it. And we saw instances where, in fact, some governors were saying, we cannot build your roads because you never voted for us. You didn't vote for me, so I don't care whether you have good roads or not. Yes. Whereas, really, it's not supposed to be like that. In addition to that is also the manner in which we undertake the narrative around performance. Does it mean that for counties where we do not have professional skills, and this therefore goes back to largely the northern frontier counties, or those counties within the FCDC, where even finding a doctor is such a big struggle because of the perennial marginalization, discrimination that they have had to go through? We had a case in point, for example, in Marsabit, where they had to advertise and keep advertising for an internal auditor, and they were unable to get an auditor until, and this is factual, the governor had to ask somebody to recommend, for professional skills. So we have those kind of very lean and lean occurrences within our devolved system, but that is also largely because of failure of governors to identify capacity. What is your gap, or rather capacity gap, and then how do you ensure that you have capacity building mechanisms working with other institutions, Kenya School of Government, for example, you have the Marifa Center, the Council of Governors, to be able to build the capacity so that we don't have ethnicity as an excuse to lock out people from either accessing opportunities or being seen to be playing a critical role in service delivery.
Right. Okay, let me just also get this conversation a rung deeper and ask the relationship between, the governors and, the county assembly, the MCAs. And of course, we know the drama that has been happening so far, harking back to 2014 when it began in makwiny, where we had a stalemate to the point where actually there was a statement of disillusion that the president should, dissolve this particular county, as it were. And for me, I wondered, because it came to the table of the county of governance, and they were hailing, that statement of dissolution, instead of actually fighting it, right? But before we even head there, just give me and paint that particular picture of a relationship between the MCAs and the governors. I know for you, you'll say it's cool. Yeah, but generally, just looking around, yeah.
For now, I would say it's good, because we also got to a point where we were almost dissolving our county government. So we've had that experience of very acrimonious relationships between the executive and the assembly. And in an ideal world, you want to have an executive that is able to plan, is able to budget, is able to then execute whatever plans that it has put into place with the support and oversight of the assembly, and with the support of the assembly in terms of legislative matters and any public participation and representation roles that they should be enacting together with the citizens. What you find is that a lot of interests come into play. It's politics, so there's always going to be a lot of interests that are conflicting.
It's good you mentioned politics. Do you think then also they're being politically weaponized?
But that's always going to happen. I mean, we're living in a political world. we got into this seat through a political process. So the likelihood of certain processes being politicized is extremely high. And we're still in a place where we're in the teething stages of understanding who needs to be doing what and who needs to be addressing what matters within what particular process in a manner that will be rational, fair, and hopefully neutral. We're nowhere near there just yet.
Thank you. Kevin, did you find it a bit consternating that, yes, we had the Council of Governors, even the senators, that were actually, vouching for the dissolution of the county government of Makwiny, until now the president had to put up a task force to see if the reasons that were being projected, they actually hold water for them to dissolve this particular county. So for me, I wondered, were they really custodians, first of all, as the senators of this particular, to give a good advice to the president? And even the Council of Governors, why do we have it in the first place if critical matters of dissolution will come to the table and still they will say, dissolve this particular county?
One of the things that happened with Makwiny, which is actually a case point of dissolution of counties, is politics. Because, and in addition to your surprises, is the fact that even the governor himself also supported that particular dissolution. And we had a conversation.
Things are not really working.
Exactly. Yeah. We had a conversation with His Excellency Kivutha Kibwana, and he said, yes, I am for this dissolution. Why? Because if you are a governor who is in a county where the relationships between your assembly and your office are acrimonious, you cannot do anything. Laws cannot be passed, because by constitution, the county assemblies support the executive by ensuring that laws are passed, bills are put in place, and before the governor sends to them. So if the county assembly says, we do not do that, you cannot run your county. If the assembly says we can't pass your budgets as a county government, there is nothing that will happen. So as a governor, when you get to the level where you realize that your hands are tied, you basically dissolve, because the constitution actually allows for dissolution of counties, and anybody can ask the president, as long as your issues are clear and they relate to the requirements of a dissolution of the county government, and you go to the Senate and the senators have their discussions and it is clear. However, one of the challenges that I feel is a great concern to devolution is what responds to the question you asked about the relations between the governors and county assemblies. In my view, I have the imagination that these relationships are transactional other than transformational. They are transactional because county assembly members will ask for what's in it for me. If I pass,
politics is interest.
Exactly, it's politics and its interest against the bare minimum of the citizens' expectations, services to be delivered. So if you assembly members say we need X amounts of millions in our bank accounts before we pass your budgets, and this is what we truly see in almost all the counties, including the county in the city called Nairobi, where every time we have challenges with the budget being passed, right now as we speak, the clerk is away, we have an acting clerk, purely because of inability of the governors to meet the expectations, which are selfish interests, related to money matters. Number two is failure of us to undertake a clear audit of performance of county assemblies. So you had 2013, 2017, how many laws did the county assembly pass to be able to enhance performance of the executive? If the laws do not go beyond 15, you are not doing very well, yeah? Between 2017 and right now we are headed to 2022, the end of the second term of the county integrated development planning. If the counties are not supporting the governments to be able to deliver on the expectations of the citizens, the assemblies are not doing well. So in finishing, we must therefore look at how we build the capacity of the members, the county assembly members. Some of them cannot debate. Some of them do not understand the budget process. Some of them do not understand the legislative process. Whereas on the other side, we have governors who are professors, like Makwiny is a professor. How do you therefore sit with somebody who does not understand the book information and the practice knowledge and keeps demanding certain things which are supposed to be delivered to them?
Dibal, I love what
briefly, because we've pinched for time. Yeah, you can interject.
I just love what he has said about the fact that we need to have
Thank you for loving something I've said.
Performance management of the county assemblies, and how many laws have they passed? Yeah. He sat here for a while talking about the failures of governors not being able to pass certain laws for us to be able to have revenues to assist with our administration work. Now, if the county assemblies are failing on that, why are you putting it on the governors?
No, but on source revenue.
That is the
He's
failure.
really painted himself in a corner.
Yes,
No.
Exactly.
These are
so
two things.
That's your own medicine.
These are two things. The first issue is an on-source revenue. The constitution refers to the county governor as the CEO. When the company is failing, you don't throw the bag to the person who sits at the reception. When it comes to laws and the constitution, and the constitution has given the assemblies 3 responsibilities: representation, legislation, and oversight.
Fantastic.
It is the role of the legislators to pass legislation.
Right.
It is the role of the governors to ensure that on-source revenue is effected in the counties.
Fantastic. You know, I'm really stuck for time, but I'll be remiss if I don't really ask this question, because I think this has been also a very heated argument in the public forum as well. You know, public participation. And I wonder how effective it has been from the county level, because people are saying, you know, we're not really involved in the decision making of what is happening within our counties. And so far, you always make these announcements in the newspapers. Some of us, we don't access the newspapers, we don't read newspapers. Do you think there can be a discernible difference on how you are effecting the public participation process itself with the citizen engagement? Because I think that one is failing dismally.
My opinion of public participation is that it is a very sore point for all county governments, and it is one that needs to be intentionally carried out for it to have any form of impact. And in some places, you might find that people are saying that they're holding meetings just to rubber stamp them. In some places, the challenge has been that are the citizens actually reading the necessary laws, documents, even newspapers, to be able to engage appropriately. In some places, there's an expectation of nitalipwa nini, what will I be paid to be able to go for a meeting? That then extends the budgetary expenditure, which may not necessarily exist, because we have to have planning for how we're spending our money on actual development projects, not on facilitating you to come to a meeting to agree or not to agree with a project.
Of maybe a poor civic education on what, you know, this particular public participation is all about.
It's a case of point of poverty, not necessarily of civic education.
Okay.
We live in very poor areas where being able to spend 2 or 3 hours away from your cow that is generating and feeding it grass, you will say, I need to have some kind of cost benefit to this, right? So you will expect some little token on. So, but just to get back, we have gotten to a point where in some cases the citizenry is a lot more educated on what it needs to be engaging with the government to prioritize the development projects that will then come in for their benefit. Prior to that, it used to be that it's being forced on you. There's a bit more say now, and in counties that have been able to enact this, our county being one of them, makwiny, West Pokot, Uasin Gishu, there's a number of them that have been able to engage with the citizen in a manner that is a journey. We're walking the journey and not necessarily telling them that this is what needs to be happening.
Right. Thank you so much. Just a rejoinder from you, then we wind up. There's a lot of not really covered, but thank you nonetheless for coming.
Public participation is a national value. If you look at Article 10, Article 10, Chapter 6, one of the 9 principles of devolution is public participation. Our county governments have not done well to ensure that the citizens are participating. And if you look at the County Governments Act, Section 100 of that Act mandates counties to put in place measures. And some of these measures are actually ensuring that the 2 hours of this citizen who is being taken away from his or her, daily wage or whatever, is covered. And that covering is through the budget process. If governors don't think that citizens are supposed to participate, we will not have them putting those kind of budget lines in the budgets, because county assemblies then will pass budgets that do not have, lines to ensure that citizens are being facilitated to be engaged in public participation processes. And that is why we see county governments putting in place projects that are not citizen-focused. you know. In some places, citizens say we are called for those meetings, we make our voices heard, we make recommendations, but nothing is ever done. Sometimes they say they come with big bulky documents which nobody cares to break down to these citizens. In some parts of this country, people cannot speak in proper English, let alone just listening to hear what you are saying. If governors do not consider public participation as a basic minimum requirement for their success in devolution, they will continue to fail. And it is only up to recently that we had almost all the 47 counties now passing the Public Participation Act, which is also a responsibility of counties.
Fantastic.
Because through that, then you have thresholds of how citizens are supposed to participate, and also ensuring that you organize them into sector working groups so that those who have interest in agriculture are organized around agriculture.
Fantastic.
Those who have interest in education participate around education. But we don't see effective measures by county governments through those kind of channels to ensure that citizens are participating.
You're a software engineer, you know, also from that particular aspect, how you should have organized maybe a hub, you know, Silicon Valley within the Taita, Taveta. I don't know, maybe something is happening on the ground.
Yeah, precisely.
Majala would be able to tell us. But finally, just 30 seconds, because we're winding up, we're strapped for time. Just 30 seconds, your headline thoughts.
Devolution is a journey, and it is a journey that we all need to be engaged in, from the very top levels of the president to the bottom levels of the youth, just getting their ID, trying to figure out how they can actively participate in democracy, which is what our country is currently. We need to ensure that everyone is carrying out the responsibilities as required. And we need to ensure that the public especially is empowered to know that they're the ones who hold the strength. Not the elite, not the politicians, not the 10% that seems to be making a lot of noise on these forums, for example, or in the media. We need to have the power go back right to the grassroots.
Thank you. Kevin, you 30 seconds?
Devolution is the cornerstone of our sustainable development. It is incumbent upon governors and county governments to put in place measures to ensure that citizens' voices are heard and that resources are equitably and judiciously used. We must stop the theft of public resources and corruption that we are seeing in counties, because ultimately you are a governor for, if you're lucky, 10 years, 5 for each of the single terms. After that, what do? Do you want to form a regional government so that who gives you the mandate? Do you want to keep bothering people to pay for your health insurance when you fail to put in place measures to ensure that health is sustainable?
Thank you.
So we have effective measures. Let's do what we are required to do, and the sky will be the limit.
So, governorship, a private fiefdom or a servant leadership?
The ideal scenario is supposed to be servant leadership. What we have is fiefdomship.
A one-liner.
What we have now is a fiefdomship.
Okay, let's hear from Majala as well. I know, of course, the answer before.
It's definitely servant leadership. It's definitely servant leadership.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this cogent, insightful conversation we've had, of course. And thank you for graciously consenting to be part of, Siasa Bomba, our first installment. I really thank you so much. Yes, it's still a private fiefdom, where it is servant leadership. Yeah. We leave it at that so much. It's up to maybe our audience to also make the assessment as well. But I want to thank you nonetheless also for joining us this first installment of Siasa Bomba, where we're looking at the role of governors in devolved Kenya. Is it a private fiefdom or a servant leadership? And I think from the cogent discussion that we've had, well, you can make your own assessment. Thank you so much. My name is Dibala Nair.
I filmed a position because I knew